This morning, we kind of touched into Deuteronomy chapter 13 last week. So what we're going to do, we're just going to kind of back up and start over again in it because we didn't really get that far in it. We had finished up Deuteronomy chapter 12. We're going to go through 13 probably pretty quick, jump over into 14. May spend a little time in 14, but we used chapter 14 to explain chapter 12, so we kind of been back and forth in those two. So anyway, in Deuteronomy chapter 13, the conversation goes something like this. Enticers to idolatry stone, without regard to the nearness of relationship. Idolatrous cities are not to be spared. So this is kind of going to be the theme of chapter 13. And it's more of what we have heard before. None of this message is new. It may be new somewhat to some of those now that are getting ready to inherit the promised land. This is the group that's going to go in and take the promised land. Kind of want to use the word kind of semi-staged at the borders of Jordan, ready to do that. As we talked last week, it has not happened, okay? So what Moses is doing here is reminding them, re-instructing them about what God is going to expect when they get into the promised land. So it's quite a lengthy discourse that he's doing right here in this, and we talked about that a couple of weeks in advance, and we're probably going to take a look at it again to kind of give us a refresher. Deuteronomy 13 is a stern call for the Israelites to remain steadfast in their worship of God, warning against the influences of false prophets, dreamers, and even loved ones that might tempt them toward idolatry. Through a series of strong directives, it underscores the profound significance of loyalty to God and delineates the consequences of straying from Him. So, as we said before, that is one of the kind of overgoing themes throughout all of this, is trying to keep the children of Israel faithful to God, okay? So that's re-illustrated over and over and over again. And it's just like with us today, one of the things that is often stressed as we go through the New Testament is the church remaining faithful to who? To God. Not letting foreign influences come in and influence its worship, its direction, its livelihood, or whatever. And some of those letters that were written, to those different churches, like 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, written to combat Gnosticism that was going on. Some of the letters to the church at Galatia were written about false teachers coming in with different doctrines of trying to bind parts of the old law and things of that nature. So we see that was well addressed too in the New Testament, and it's still being addressed today. So we find that this is nothing new in God's ideas. Just to show you what we're talking about here, we begin to talk about some of the things Moses is talking to them about. It's not going to happen until they come over into the promised land. I want to give you kind of a point in time of where we're at in all this, okay? Currently, this is where we're at. Israel is getting prepared to cross Jordan about 1451 BC. Okay, this is about the time frame that we're in. They have not crossed over yet, as we talked last week and gave scripture on that. They're getting ready to go over. Now, the first temple was built somewhere around 959 BC, about 500 years after they left Egypt, 490 years, 500 years after they left Egypt. So what are we seeing here? We're seeing that there is going to be a lot of water and a lot of history, Jeff, go under the bridge, a lot of apostasy, a lot of kings are going to be back. There's a whole lot of things that's going to happen here till we even get to the first temple being built, okay? So this is kind of where we're at. So this is why Moses is giving such a stern warning about all of this, okay? So we know the first temple was built, but then something happened to that first temple, didn't it? The Babylonians came in and destroyed it and took the children of Israel off into exile, didn't they? Somewhere about 586 BC. And a lot of times when we're talking about the Jewish law and the Jewish temple, one of the first things we think about, oh, that's that temple in AD 70. That's the second temple. And if you just look at it and think about it, we're still a long way from AD 70, Jeff, and AD 33. So this is what you're going to run into with this. You're going to see a lot of this restated again by the Old Testament prophets, but they were fighting what? Apostatism. Apostatism is what they were fighting, okay? So we find that took place. While they were in Babylonian exile, something else happened. Well, they could no longer go to the authorized place of worship, right? Because they're now in prison, right? They're prisoners of war, they're slaves, have been taken to another country. So what begins to start happening? They still wanted a place to pray, to sing, and talk about the Word of God, right? So what was introduced while they were in exile is the synagogues. Okay, we know Jesus not only went in the temple, but he also went into what? The synagogues also. So you're going to start to see the synagogues come into existence while they're in Babylonian exile. 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 17, for example. 1 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 39. Okay? So you're going to see that come into existence as we go through this. Wrong button. And finally, not finally, but we know the second temple by Cyrus, he's the one that allowed the Jews to go back and start rebuilding, didn't he? Start rebuilding the wall and things of that nature, okay? So Cyrus was the ruler that allowed them to go do that, and we'll get more into that when we get over like in the 1st and 2nd Samuel. We get over into 1st and 2nd Kings, and we get into all that, okay? So that's a long way out there, Jeff. Okay? And then this temple lasted until it was destroyed by the Romans in AD 70. Okay? So this is what we're looking at here. So, Eric, we ain't got started good. Okay? Because you're going to see there's a whole lot of things that's going to go under the water and go on the bridge and go down the pipe and all like that before we even get to that point. Okay? We're not even with them over in the promised land yet. Okay, Moses is reminding them of things that's going to take place when they get into it. And I forgot to silence this thing. Okay. Any thoughts or questions on that? That's kind of a very brief timeline, okay, of what's going on with this. Okay. Okay. Also remember that these discourses, and there's 4 of them if you break them out, that Moses is given here. So a lot of times you can't just go to one particular discourse or one particular chapter and say, hey, wait a minute, that's that. But you got to go over, like we did with chapter 12 and chapter 14, Morgan. They had to go a little bit farther to find the whole scope, because you can't look at just the first couple of letters of a contract to get the whole picture, right? Because contracts are multi-pages, right? There may be something down in the contract that you're leery of. Or there may be something in the contract that you really like, okay? But you won't know till you read the contract, right? It's just the same thought here. So we find the outline of these 4 discourses look like this. From chapter 1, verse 1 to chapter 4, verse 43 was Moses' first discourse to these people. Chapter 4, verse 44 through chapter 26, verse 19 was Moses' second discourse, okay? This is the one we're in. It's the most lengthy, okay, as you can see. It spans quite a few chapters. I guess if you do it by multiplication, roughly 22 chapters is going to cover that discourse. So he's going to pack a whole lot into this, okay? And then chapter 27 through chapter 30, that's Moses' third discourse, and it's considered a discourse of his final words and his death from chapter 31 to chapter 34. Okay, so this is what you're looking at here. Okay, so we've got to remember where are we at in this study. We haven't even gone into the promised land. Matter of fact, we ain't crossed Jordan yet. Moses hadn't died yet, looking over looking over into the promised land. So, well, we're a long way from a lot of this, Eric, you know? So this is one thing to keep in mind. So maybe every once in a while, and I know I was doing that for a while, I'll drop in, where are we at in this thing? What's going on here? Where are we at? Well, this is where we're at right now. So, if you look at this, we're about looking at it from another historical point to see where we're at. The flood took place somewhere around 2348 BC. Now we're at 1451 BC. So we're about, 900 years, just roughly in my mind, from the flood to now. Okay, so that's where we're at. Okay, so. Verse 1 through 5, beware the false prophets and dreamers. Daniel, would you start with that, please? Deuteronomy 13, verses 1 through 5.
There arises among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and he gives you a sign or a wonder. And the sign or the wonder comes to pass, of which he spoke to you, saying, let us go after other gods, which you have not known, and let us serve them. You shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams, for the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. You shall walk after the Lord your God and fear him, and keep his commandments, and obey his voice. You shall serve him and hold fast to him. But that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death, because he has spoken in order to turn you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you from the house of bondage, to entice you from the way in which the Lord your God commanded you to walk. So you shall put away the evil from your midst.
Okay, so pretty stern warning, isn't it? God did not want them to intermingle with these false teachers and these false prophets. If one arose in the camp that claims to be a dreamer or a prophet, and his motive is to do what? Draw you away from the Lord thy God, what do you do with him? Kill him. I hate to say it like that, you'd stone him, won't you? And that's what they usually did back then. They stoned people, didn't they? They got rid of that. So what does that mean to us today? Well, that means getting rid of all manner of sin. We know they use the killing, if you will, to show a physical form of getting rid of all the sin. Okay? So this is what he's talking about. Don't let that sin even crop up. If it does, don't let it take root. Go ahead and get it out from among you. Okay? And I want you to notice, too, where this was to be done. It was public. Okay? It was not done in private. Okay, it says here in verse 5, so shalt thou put the evil away from the midst of thee. So this was not done in a private manner. Okay, you're going to put the evil away from the midst of you. Well, if you're in the midst of something, guess what? It's around you. Okay, so very stern warning from God. And one of the things too you notice here. It talks about, God allowing these things to do you that to kind of test your faith. Is that unusual? No. Matter of fact, Peter talked about this, about the trying of our faith is like gold, most precious. Notice what he says here to us today. Very similar thought in nature, okay? A testing, a trying, okay? Notice it says here, I'm going to begin in 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 6. Wherein ye greatly rejoice, though now for a season if need be, in the heaviness through the manifold temptations, that the trial of your faith, being more precious than gold, perisheth, though it be tried with fire, might be found to praise, honor, and the glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. So the trying of one's faith is not unusual. What that does is that purifies, doesn't it? Okay? kind of the way of saying it separates the men from the boys. You know, it kind of puts it in perspective of how you trust God, okay? It's kind of like this. There's a soldier, when he goes into boot camp, then he comes out, they continue training, right? They try to make the trial as realistic as possible, right? Okay? That way you begin to trust in their system, okay, that it works. Well, God's the same way. Do you trust in His system? Do you trust Him and what He says? Do you believe what He says is true? And one of the things you find as you go through these different trials in life, and they're going to come, okay? If you will work with God in these trials and not take too much upon yourself, He'll deliver you, and notice what happens. You're stronger, aren't you? You're stronger. Matter of fact, you know, having a little age, I mean, I can think about things that have gone on that 50 years ago would have been just, yeah, you know, because you've been through it and you experienced it, you trust God. Now when a lot of things crop up, you don't even think about it, you know. You don't even think about it. So, but now, will God let you die in your trials? Yeah, a lot of people have went to the grave never receiving God's provision on the other end because they didn't leave it with God. Okay? So that does happen with this. Any of your brethren got any comment on that? If a prophet or dreamer of dreams appears among the Israelites and provides a sign of wonder that comes true, but then encourages them to follow other gods, they must not heed this individual. Such occurrences test the faithfulness of God's people to God. The false prophet or dreamer should be put to death for trying to lead Israel away. Notice something in this, though, about it coming true. You know, it kind of makes you stop and think about, what is it, 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, is it? Let me turn there right quick, where it talks about the son of perdition being revealed. And yes, do I think that is 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, do I believe that's talking about a centralized figure that was going to come? Yes. But if you go there and read that real close, it could be an individual, couldn't it? It could be a person, okay? It's just like this thing about the Antichrist that the world just salivates over and got all these wild ideas. Well, it's true. Could that be an individual? Yeah, a leader or something? Oh, yeah. But really, if you look at it, the term simply means against God or against Christ, doesn't it? Could that be an individual? Paul said there are many antichrists that's gone out into the world. There are many people out there that stands against Christ who don't confess that Jesus Christ came in the flesh and was God's son. Antichrist. It's that simple. Okay? That's what that's about. But notice what he says here about these signs and things. And it's really fascinating. I'm going to jump down to verse 9 of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. It says here, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders. Okay? Power and signs and lying wonders. Okay? And with all deceivability of unrighteousness in them that perish because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And verse 11 is powerful. We don't like to think about this, but it's true. For this cause, God shall send them strong delusions that they should believe a lie. You know, so are there things out there at work and in practice, even today, that affect us? Yeah, the power of Satan is limited. You know, when Jesus Christ died on the cross and was resurrected, the power of Satan is limited. He's like a dog on a leash, on a clothesline wire, if you will. Now, he can roam about. He's still active. But what can he do? He can't literally possess us any longer. We have to do what? Allow him to get in. Okay? We have to allow him to get in. So how does he do that? Well, he knocks through temptation, right? As long as we don't answer the door, we're okay. The problem becomes, Morgan, very often he knocks and what do? Open the door, don't we? And there he is. So that's what you have to watch in all this. So there are things out there that were physical in nature here, but are still spiritual in nature to us today. I probably spent more time on that than I wanted to, but kind of gets real interesting about these false prophets and dreamers, you know. And there are people out there even today that talk about dreaming dreams and being a prophet and all like that, you know. And so it's something to be aware of, something that you have to be cognizant of in this. Temptation. The temptation from loved ones. He addresses that. Read, would you, verses 6 through 11.
Your brother, your mother's son or daughter, or the wife you cherish, or your friend who is as your own soul, entice you secretly, saying, let us go and serve other gods, whom neither will you nor Father will know. Of the gods of the peoples who are around you, near you, or far from you, from one end of the earth to the other end. You shall not yield to them, or listen to him, and your eye shall not pity him, nor shall you spare or conceal him. But you shall surely kill him. Your hand shall be first against him because of the death, and afterwards in the hand of all people. So you shall stone him to death, because he has sought to seduce you from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Then all Israel will hear it and be afraid, and will never again do such a wicked thing among you.
Okay, so here again, was any of this done in the closet? No. It was done publicly, wasn't it? We know that punishment of evildoers at one time in the world, and in some places they still do, they punish an evildoer in secret or do they punish them in public? Well, they take them out in the public square and behead them or shoot them or whatever they do to them, you know. We used to do that here in this country, you know, even up through the early 1900s. Had what's called public hangings, didn't they? You go down there behind the courthouse, they'd have a gallows built and have a certain day, and hey, it was done publicly, wasn't it? So, and that's done publicly because what? It's a warning to everybody else. This is what can happen if you apostatize. And so, you know, back in this period of time, God, he took a stern look at this, didn't he? And it's hard, isn't it? If you just stop and think about it, it's a hard thing to do, especially when you're talking about family members and loved ones. But a lot of times, that's where to start, won't it? With family members and loved ones, and it just kind of expands out, you know. I don't know, and we've talked about this before, why would anybody want to go back to the old law? You know, people tell me about instrumental music down there. Well, David did it. What else did David do? Had employed wives, done a lot of killing, shed a lot of blood. I mean, what did they do back then? I mean, everybody thinks about, oh, it's the greatest thing. You know, they had instrumental music. That's just one small tip of the iceberg. We've been kind of going to rattle in a deep well when we get in chapter 14 like we did 12 just briefly. The iceberg's a whole lot bigger than the tip. Okay? And this is what we're seeing here.
You know, the Lord tolerated a lot of that stuff back then. A lot of that stuff the Lord
Sure.
tolerated back then.
Sure.
But he said it pays better to sacrifice.
Right.
But now it's all about obedience.
Right. That's it. So, you know, but you know, you have to pay the piper somewhere down the line, don't you? And I'm sure within this, and it doesn't say this because he's taking a hard, stern look at these people before they cross over. You know, you want to give people an opportunity to change, right? Okay? And, you know, I'm just glad we live under the law of grace and truth and not the old Bible, Jeff. I'm afraid the population of the earth would be a lot slimmer than it is today, okay? Today the Lord, he's long-suffering, that he don't want any to perish, that he might call all to repentance, isn't it? So, you know, so it's some hard teaching in this when you really take a look at it, but that's what God commanded, and that's what he expected them to do. And you got to remember something too. These people hadn't been too long come out of what themselves? Idolatry of Egypt. You know, they didn't change overnight. You know, nothing changed overnight. Okay? So there was a lot of things still going on amongst them, as Eric alluded to, that God didn't approve of. But what he's telling them now is things are going to shift a little bit when you get over in the promised land, because we're going to find that even as we go forward with this, the cities that's even being built by them in the promised land, in these different tribal locations, if they apostatize, guess what you do with that city and all the inhabitants and everything in it? Okay? So you're seeing that God now is, shall I say, how would I say it, up in the ante about what he expects out of them? Because you're no longer going to be a wandering tribe. You're going to be stationary. There's a lot of things you can and cannot do when you're wandering that you can do when you're stationary, right? Okay? So you're going to become stationary in all this. So, anyway. Idolatry in Israel's cities, verses 12 through 18. Jeff, do you have that?
If you hear in one of your cities, which the Lord your God is giving you to dwell there, and certain worthless fellows have gone out among you and have drawn away inhabitants of their city, saying, let's go serve other gods, which you have not known, then you shall inquire and make search of and ask diligently, and behold, if it's true that certain and such an abomination has been done among you, you shall surely put the inhabitants of that city to the sword, devouring it and to destruction. All who are in it and its cattle and the edge of the sword. You shall gather all its spoil into the midst of the open square, and burn the city and all its spoil with fire. As the whole burnt offering to the Lord your God, it shall be a heap forever, and shall not be built again. None of the devoted things shall stick in your hand, and the Lord may turn from your fierceness of his anger, and show you mercy and compassion on you, and multiply you as he swore to your fathers. If you obey the voice of the Lord your God, keeping all its commandments, I am commanding you today, and doing what is right in the sight of the Lord your God.
Okay, remember we said he's going to include the cities. What would they to utterly do? Destroy it. All the people, the spoils, the goods, the city. What does that mean for us today in a spiritual nature? All sin got to go, right? And that's what he's doing here. All sin basically has got to go. So God was not going to tolerate that in their cities, okay? He wanted them to put this away. If an Israelite city falls into idol worship, due diligence must be done to confirm the wickedness. Now, it gets back to this. Notice what has to happen here, though. The wickedness has to be confirmed, Eric. It's not something that you just can arbitrarily go there and do on your own, okay? And one of the things that we're going to see come into play here, too, is the eldership and the leadership of the Israelite people, as well as the Levitical priesthood, the judges is what I'm talking about, and the Levitical priesthood is going to make a determination on a lot of this stuff, okay? That's their duty and responsibility. That's why you got to have credible men established in this, okay? So we'll get to that a little bit later. If true, its inhabitants and livestock must be completely destroyed as an offering to God. The city should then remain a ruin forever, never to be rebuilt. Kind of makes you wonder about some of those cities and things they find over in that part of the world. We know time has passed and they were conquered and destroyed and things of that nature. It does kind of make you wonder about how much of that leads back to this right here. You know, about I'm going off into idolatrous practices and things of that nature, you know. So, on that. Deuteronomy 13, while fierce, serve as a timeless reminder of the importance of unwavering faith and the perils of temptation. It beckons us to be vigilant against all forms of idolatry, whether from external sources or even those close to us. In an era of myriad distractions of differing beliefs, its core message remains relevant. Stay loyal to the divine truth and guard your faith from corrupting influences. So that's something that we need to be cognizant of, Daniel.
This reminds me of the story of Stephen.
Yeah.
All the people who stop up their ears, oh, you're speaking a whole new religion.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of him.
Yeah.
Even though he was speaking the truth, it was against their
Tradition.
tradition of false religion.
Yeah, that's kind of like what we talked about in chapter 12. You know, we turned over and looked at Jesus, and, you know, the Pharisees were like, why your disciples eat with unwashed hands? Jesus said, well, that's your tradition. They were talking about a common meal there. Okay, that's your tradition. Why did he purge that temple? Was it because he hadn't given directive when he gave that in Deuteronomy chapter 14 about, okay, you're going to be stationed there. Some of you are going to live a long way away. Some of you are not. Those of you that are, there's an option. You can turn your sacrifices into money, bring the money with you, and then you can purchase whatever you need to complete the sacrifices, right? So was he after the sacrifices they were selling, or the manner and that they were doing it in? What was their motive behind this? Well, one, they had corrupted the temple, hadn't they, Jim? And two, they had made the sacrificing to God what? Merchandise. Have we ever seen merchandise being made? I'm going to use the term loosely and generically to start with, but have we ever seen churches and organization that is actually a merchandise seller? Everything from meals to T-shirts to car washes. Some of them have gaming center for the kids. Pick something, okay? Making merchandise of it, isn't it? I remember years ago, they had a noon luncheon on Thursdays for business people in the Montgomery community, and they were always inviting some of us to go, and I never went. But what I always found fascinating about it, oh, by the way, it's a $3 service charge. They didn't forget that, Daniel. I don't know what it costs now with inflation, probably $10, you know. But so, you know, so there are things. Even, unfortunately, I'm afraid that some in the church have started doing this, okay? I know of these congregations now, some of you more, I hate to categorize, but the more liberal ones, they have things like meeting you at the well in the morning. And what that is, they've set up like a little cafe. You can get your coffee, you can get your roll, you can sit down there and listen to the so-called gospel music with drums, and it's rock music is what it is. And you can use our Wi-Fi. Oh, by the way, we have a little bookstore here on these different authors you can pick up. It's a real good Christian environment. And Jeff, you ain't got to go too far to find that. Ain't far at all. So, what have they done? They made merchandise of it, hadn't they? It's a money-making thing, Daniel. Read, they're making money. Yeah, you know. So, but anyway, that's another story. So, this is what it's about. So, you have to be careful about those things, okay? Here's how you like that picture of me. Okay, teaching points. Well, one of those ain't working. And we talked about Deuteronomy 13, 1 through 3, the warnings against false prophets and dreamers, and about the things that you shouldn't listen to them. If they try to lead you away to another god, they're to be put out from among you. So we talked about that. We talked about the trial of your faith. That is put in place. That's the devil's temptational part of it, to try to pull you away. And God said, don't you follow after those people. Call to exclusive worship. This chapter underscores the necessity of exclusive worship of the Lord, rejecting any form of idolatry or allegiance to other gods. You know, a lot of this you can look at, there was no interfaith fellowship. I know you've heard the term and you've probably seen it and you've probably received literature on it. Even the church now gets involved in what's called interfaith fellowship. Back several years ago, a question had come up. Anyway, the thing is, I was referred to the local ministerial association here in Watauga County for an answer, and they wanted to know if we were a member of it. Those types of, that's interfaith fellowship, isn't it? Allowing denominational speakers to come into a congregation and teach their lessons just like anybody else would. So all that goes on, and there's all kind of reasons for it and thought behind it and why we do it, but it doesn't hold water. So you have to be careful of this interfaith fellowship. I guess that's another way to put that, isn't it? Verses 6 to 11 highlight the communal responsibility to address idolatry, even close family members, and we talked about that. The community must prioritize faithfulness to God over personal relationships. What's this one? This just took longer than I thought. And that's the end of chapter 13. Any of you brother got any comments or thoughts or questions or anything like that? It's a pretty rough chapter and it's pretty severe, isn't it, about what he's expecting out of it. Deuteronomy chapter 14, we've already talked about and referred to. There are some things we're going to go over. Probably the first 22 verses of it, which we're not going to get to today. We're just going to kind of read through it because we've already talked about the dietary things they could eat, could not eat, clean and unclean. But there were things they could eat, as we talked about in chapter 12. There are things they can eat in an ordinary common meal that they can't use in worship. Still true today, isn't it? I can have spaghetti and meatballs at home, and I can have a side salad, and I can drink me a Coke, right? But if I say, hey, well, wait a minute. We're going to use spaghetti and meatballs for the Lord's Supper, and we're going to have Coca-Cola for the wine. What have I just done? I've transgressed, haven't I? God is specific about what we do in worship. Now, what we do in the home is we do a lot of things in the home that we don't do in the worship service of the church. Why? Because, very simply put, it's not authorized. God has said what he wanted. I remember Jay, but I ain't going to call his last name. Some of y'all may know him. I've worked with him. Pretty good guy. He went to one of those big denominational churches there in Prattville. It was out there on Sheila Boulevard. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Anyway, I got invited to Super Bowl Sunday. What it was, they were going to have their regular, worship service. They're going to have a big Super Bowl tailgate party in the fellowship hall. Okay, all right. After that, they were going back to the auditorium, and at that time they had a big screen TV, and they were going to let the big screen TV down so everybody could watch the Super Bowl. What's wrong with this picture? You know? Can we watch the Super Bowl in the home, Jeff? Where did God authorize being watched in a church? Or in the church? If you're not a member of the church or you're not part of the body of Christ, I guess you can do what you want, okay? It's not it. I said, Jay, how y'all come up with that? He said, well, it's just something that we've always done. He didn't have a clue about any of the rest of it, about, well, that's not authorized in the Bible. Well, we've got God's thought in mind. So, it's like, so anyway, that's one of the things too that you see happening within religion in general, but I'm afraid some of that's in the church too when you go to canceling your Sunday services because of the World Series. I know where that happened not too far from here. And it was on the side marquee, okay, over at Hunter Station. So I remember that well. That created kind of a stir amongst members of the church, okay? So I can't say in all honesty, some of that's not right. It's not here where we're at here in our community, but it's there, okay? It's there, okay? So it's something to be cognizant of. Deuteronomy 14 divulges deep into the regulations and guidelines. The word deep, and I'm going to ring the buzzer here, is the key here. Because sometimes you have to look at this real close and separate what you do in a common meal from what you do in your worship service. There are things regulated for a common meal that's okay to eat, okay? There are things, though, that's regulated in worship that you're not allowed to use. So sometimes it's hard to separate what he's talking about between the two. But this is what he's doing here in 14, really is sort of in a way clearing up chapter 12, okay? If you want to look at it like that, okay? So we'll stop right there and we'll get into 14 next week and we'll get ready for the worship service.